French President Emmanuel Macron is kicking off a tour through 3 Southeast Asian countries. He starts in Vietnam on Sunday before heading on to Indonesia and Singapore. In a region caught between the U.S. and China, Macron is trying to pitch France as a reliable and respectful alternative. For some insight into what's at stake on the visit, we can bring in David Camroux, a senior researcher and adjunct professor at Sciences Po University here in Paris. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. First, just what do you see as Macron's main goal on this tour?
Well, there are two kinds of goals. There's an economic goal, there's a commercial goal, which is to support French businesses, especially arms manufacturers in Southeast Asia. And there's a diplomatic objective, which is, like other Europeans, to present France as a third reliable partner. The countries of Southeast Asia find themselves stuck between a large object to the north, which is China, and a floating orange ghost, which is the United States of Donald Trump. And the Americans are trying to force them to choose between China and the United States. And that's a very, very difficult choice, choose between your largest trading partner and the country that provides, at least for the Philippines and some other countries, a degree of security guarantees. So the idea is that, presenting France and European countries as reliable third parties. So, for example, if for weaponry, you are better off buying, say, Rafale fighters in Indonesia than buying American fighters, because you don't want that degree of dependency on the United States, and you don't want to buy Chinese as well, because it gets another kind of dependency. So I think that is kind of the objective. After the visits in Vietnam, historic partner, comprehensive strategic partner, and Indonesia, he'll be in Singapore. He'll give the keynote address at the Shangri-La Security Dialogue to present France's vision of the Indo-Pacific. France is the only European resident power in the Indo-Pacific, with territories. 1 million French people live in the Indo-Pacific. But most other European countries have purely trade and economic interests. But France has clear security interests. He'll also want to talk about Ukraine, and perhaps more discreetly Indonesia, to talk about Gaza and to talk about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
And how successful do you think France is going to be in reaching its goals? I mean, how is France viewed in Asia, particularly in comparison to China and the United States?
Well, it is kind of viewed as that reliable third partner. France is not a major investor, say, compared to Japan and South Korea, which are the other competing powers. But there is a generally positive view of France. There are concerns about what they call European green imperialism, about the Europeans imposing their norms, say, in questions of the environment. But I think there's a convergence of interest at the moment, particularly because the United States is punishing its so-called friends in Southeast Asia. I mean, putting a 46% tariff on Vietnam is not the way of winning friends and influencing people. American soft power is in rapid decline because of the cuts now made in the State Department. So, the kind of erratic or chaotic behavior of the Trump administration does provide an opening for third parties to enter and to win contracts and to have influence.
Macron's first stop is in Vietnam, a country that has a colonial history with France. Is that something that's likely to come up, and does it still impact the relations between the two countries today?
Much less so, because after the French were the Americans, and so compared to American imperialism, neo-imperialism, French imperialism perhaps was the lesser evil. Now I think there's well behind us. also, the Vietnamese diaspora in France and throughout Europe has played this fantastic role as a kind of bridge between the two countries. No, I don't think those colonial questions come back in the same way as, say, the question of the use of Agent Orange does in relation to the United States.
And you also mentioned that security conference where Macron is expected to bring up support for Ukraine. How do you think that message is likely to be received by regional leaders?
Well, I think it will be well received, but the countries in Southeast Asia just have this kind of vision that the Europeans, and I think it's correct, have deux poids, deux mesures. They talk about Ukraine and the horror of the invasion, but I say on Gaza or maybe on Myanmar, they have a different view. So I think the Southeast Asians will talk about a degree of European hypocrisy, but at the same time, it's in the interest of small powers to have a rules-based international order, and Russia has clearly violated that rules-based international order with its invasion of Ukraine. So, they will be given some verbal support. I think the question of Gaza will come up, say, in Indonesia. The Indonesians are very strongly for the Palestinian cause. They provide a lot of medical assistance, hospitals in Gaza. And I think that maybe there will be, hopefully, the question of recognition, which is going to come up in the United Nations, I think in June or July, will find the Europeans and the countries of Southeast Asia converging. But again, in relation to this uncomfortable situation of being stuck between China and the United States.
All right. Well, it'll be interesting to see what comes out of this tour. We'll be keeping a close eye on it. David Camroux, thank you again so much for your analysis this morning. That's David Camroux, a senior researcher and adjunct professor at Sciences Po University here in Paris.